My wife humiliated me at our own dinner party with a joke about his size. I smiled, poured whiskey, and told her the truth I had hidden for 3 years. Her perfect ex was. She ran to vomit, and I realized our marriage died the moment she made that joke. The crystal stemware clinked against the mahogany table with a sound that should have been elegant, but instead felt like a warning bell nobody else could hear. I watched the condensation beat on my water glass, counting the droplets as they raced downward while my business partner Greg droned on about quarterly projections and market penetration strategies. His wife Linda laughed at something Allison said, and I forced myself to tune back into the conversation, plastering on the smile I had perfected over 8 years of marriage and countless dinner parties just like this one. Denver sprawled below us through the floor-to-ceiling windows of our penthouse, a glittering carpet of lights that made us feel like kings surveying their kingdom. The whole place was designed to impress without screaming wealth. All natural materials and clean lines. The kind of tasteful minimalism that cost more than most people's houses. Allison had insisted on hiring that decorator from Aspen, the one who did the governor's vacation home. I had written the check without blinking because that was what you did when you wanted to keep your wife happy. When you wanted to prove you were enough. The irony was not lost on me now. Allison was on her 3rd glass of Bordeaux, and I could see the telltale flush creeping up her neck. The way her gestures became just a fraction too expansive, her laugh a decel too loud. Greg's wife, Linda, was talking about their recent trip to Vail. Something about helicopter skiing and the rush of dropping down virgin powder between peaks that looked like they could swallow you whole. "Oh God, mountains," Allison said, and something in her tone made my jaw tighten imperceptibly. Aiden absolutely lived for that kind of thing. My ex Aiden Brooks, he was all about extreme everything. Rock climbing, backcountry skiing, base jumping once in Moab. Everything with him was always so. She paused and I could feel it coming like watching a car crash in slow motion. Big, massive. Really. And I am not just talking about his ambitions if you catch my drift. She winked at Linda and the temperature in the room dropped 20 degrees in an instant. Greg suddenly became fascinated with his napkin. Linda's smile froze on her face like a mask that had been dipped in liquid nitrogen. I could hear the sound of my own heartbeat in my ears. That steady thump 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 that reminded me I was still breathing even though everything inside me had gone cold and still and dangerously quiet. I set down my wineglass with deliberate precision, the base meeting the table with a sharp crack that seemed to echo in the sudden silence. 4 pairs of eyes swiveled toward me. I did not blink. I did not move. I simply looked at my wife with the kind of calm that comes before the storm, the kind of stillness that predators have right before they strike. Allison's smile faltered. The wine-induced bravado drained from her face as she registered what she had just done, what line she had just crossed in front of witnesses in our home, at our table. Her hand trembled slightly as she reached for her glass, but she did not pick it up. "Well," Greg cleared his throat with the enthusiasm of a man who just realized he was standing in a minefield. "Would you look at the time, Linda? Honey, didn't the sitter say she needed to leave by 10? "Oh, yes, absolutely." Linda practically leaped from her chair. "This has been lovely. Truly. But we really should." They were out the door in less than 3 minutes, leaving behind half-eaten desserts and the wreckage of whatever pleasant evening Allison had envisioned. The sound of the elevator doors closing felt like a cell door slamming shut. The silence that followed was the kind that has weight that presses down on your chest and makes it hard to breathe. Allison started bustling around the table, stacking plates with shaking hands, the china rattling like bones. "That was just a joke, Jackson. A stupid joke. I was not trying to." "You mentioned Aiden." My voice came out flat, devoid of inflection, and somehow that seemed to scare her more than if I had shouted. I remained in my chair, fingers steepled under my chin, watching her the way a scientist might observe a specimen under a microscope. "You brought him up in front of guests. You compared me to him in our home at our table." "I know. I know. I am so sorry. I was just then. I suppose it is finally time." I stood up slowly, deliberately, my 6 feet 3 inches frame unfolding with the kind of controlled grace that made her take an involuntary step backward. "Time for you to hear the truth. The one you have spent 6 years running from. The one I promised to keep buried." Her face went pale, the flush of wine draining away to leave her looking almost ghostly in the soft lighting. "What are you talking about?" "Sit down, Allison." It was not a request. She sat. I poured myself 2 fingers of whiskey from the decanter on the sideboard, took a sip, let the burn settle in my chest before I began. 3 years ago, I had a conference in Montana, corporate law symposium in Whitefish. Boring as hell, really, but the venue was spectacular. They put us up at the Granite Peak Lodge, one of those old money mountain retreats where senators and CEOs go to pretend they are just regular guys who like fishing and single malt scotch. I could see her trying to figure out where this was going, her mind racing to connect dots that did not make sense yet. "I was not looking for him, Allison. I need you to understand that. I had no idea he would be there, but there he was. Third night of the conference, sitting in the leather chair next to mine in the main lodge bar. At first, I did not even recognize him. He looked different than he does on campaign posters. His father's golden boy. The future of Colorado politics. According to every newspaper in the state, her breathing had gone shallow. You met Aiden. I did more than meet him. I took another sip of whiskey watching her over the rim of the glass. I watched him first. Actually, he was with someone. A young man. Maybe 22, 23. Pretty in that way that makes people uncomfortable if they think about it too hard. They were arguing in the corner, trying to keep their voices down. But the acoustics in that old lodge are deceptive. Sound carries. I could see her working it through. The implications starting to dawn. The boy was crying. Allison. Tears streaming down his face while Aiden kept looking around like he was afraid someone would see them together. The kid kept saying something about promises, about how Aiden said things would change after the midterm elections, how they could finally be together. And Aiden, your Aiden with his massive everything, kept telling him to shut up, to stop being so dramatic that he was going to ruin everything. No. Her voice was barely a whisper. The boy ran out into the snow, left his coat on the chair, and just bolted into a Montana blizzard. And Aiden sat there, head in his hands, looking like a man who had just watched his whole life circle the drain. That is when I walked over. I should not have. I should have left him to his misery. But I am not built that way. You know that about me. I sat down. I ordered him a drink and I waited. Outside, Denver continued its oblivious glittering. Inside, I was performing surgery on my wife's soul. And I could not stop now, even if I wanted to. It took him 20 minutes and 3 whiskeys before he started talking. He recognized me from your Instagram, from the engagement announcement you posted everywhere 6 years ago. He was already drunk, way past the point where secrets stay buried. And he told me everything. Allison. Every single thing you have spent our entire marriage idealizing. She was shaking her head, tears starting to track down her carefully made-up face. Black mascara leaving streaks like war paint. You were lying. You were just saying this because you were angry about tonight. He told me he is gay. The words fell between us like stones into water, sending ripples through everything she thought she knew. Has been his entire life. But his father, Congressman Brooks, the family values champion, the man who built his entire political career on traditional marriage and Christian principles, would rather see his son dead than dishonored. Those were his exact words. He would rather I be dead. Allison made a sound like she had been punched in the stomach. You were perfect, he said. Beautiful, accomplished, from a good family. His father loved you. The cameras loved you. You were the ideal political wife for the ideal political son. And you were so eager to believe in the fairy tale. So desperate for him to be your Prince Charming that you never noticed he could barely stand to touch you. Stop it. She was sobbing now, but I could not stop. 6 years of swallowing comparisons, of hearing about how adventurous Aiden was, how passionate, how alive he made her feel. 6 years of being found wanting in comparison to a ghost. He told me about the fights you would have because he always had an excuse not to be intimate. Work stress, campaign pressure, wanting to wait for the right moment. He said you would cry and ask if he still found you attractive and he would lie and say of course he did when the truth was he was sneaking off to meet that boy and others like him in hotel rooms 3 counties over. Why? Her voice broke on the word. Why would he tell you all this? Because he was terrified. That boy he was with, he threatened to go to the press to tell Aiden's father everything if Aiden did not leave politics and be with him openly. Aiden saw his whole life ending, his father's career, his own future, everything collapsing because he could not keep his secret buried anymore. And then he looked at me, this man he had never met, who was married to the girl he used to hide behind. And he begged. I set down my glass with a sharp click. He begged me not to tell you. He said you had moved on, that you were happy with me, that dragging you back into his mess would destroy you for no reason. He said his father was dying of pancreatic cancer anyway. 6 months at most. And after that, he could finally stop pretending. He asked me for 6 months of silence. 6 months to get through his father's death and his own political exit without scandal. He was on his knees in that bar, Allison, literally on his knees, crying into my expensive shoes, begging me not to ruin him. She was staring at me like I was a stranger, like she had never seen me before in her life. And I gave him my word. I looked at this broken man, this person you had spent years mythologizing in your head every time our marriage hit a rough patch. And I felt sorry for him. Not because he was gay, but because he was so terrified of being himself that he had turned you into collateral damage. So I promised. I shook his hand and I promised I would never tell you. That I would let you keep your illusions about the great lost love of your life. You had no right. No, right? The words came out sharper than I intended. I had every right, Allison. I have earned that right with 6 years of listening to you compare our life to a fantasy that never existed. 6 years of hearing how Aiden would have done this better, planned that more romantically, Made you feel more alive. 6 years of your mother asking when I was going to take you on adventures like Aiden did. Of your sister wondering out loud if you settled when you married me. I moved toward her and she flinched, which made something inside my chest crack a little more. I kept his secret because destroying him would not have fixed us. It would have just been petty revenge. And I am not a petty man. I kept his secret because I actually respected his pain more than I resented your comparisons. But tonight, you crossed a line. You humiliated me in front of colleagues. You made a joke about your ex-lover's anatomy at our dinner table. You turned me into a punchline. I was drunk. I did not mean you meant it. Maybe not the way it came out, but you meant the sentiment behind it. You have always believed Aiden was bigger, better, more everything than I could ever be. Well, congratulations, Allison. You just bought yourself the truth. I pulled out my phone, scrolled through my contacts, found what I was looking for. He gave me his number that night, made me promise to call if you ever started asking questions about why things ended between you. Said he owed you some honesty if you ever came looking for it. Her eyes widened. Do not. I handed her my phone. Text him. Ask him yourself. Ask him if I am making this up. Ask your perfect lost love to tell you the truth he should have told you 8 years ago. Her hand shook so badly she could barely hold the phone, but she typed 3 sentences, simple and direct. So very Allison. I could see them even from where I stood. Jackson told me everything about Montana. About you. Is it true? The reply came faster than either of us expected. The phone buzzed in her hand and she looked down at the screen like it was a snake that had just bitten her. What does it say? She read it out loud, her voice hollow. He is telling the truth, Allison. All of it. You idealized something that was never real. I used you and I am sorrier than you will ever know. Jackson showed me more grace that night than I deserved. He saved me from myself. Please do not hate him for keeping my secret. He did it to protect you as much as me. The phone slipped from her fingers and clattered on the hardwood floor. She made a sound that was not quite human. Something between a wail and a gasp. And then she was running for the bathroom. I heard her retching. The sound of her perfect dinner party meal coming back up. The sound of her perfect illusions doing the same. I stood there in our expensive living room with its tasteful art and its view of the city. And I felt nothing. Not satisfaction. Not vindication. Not even the righteous anger that had been simmering in my gut for the last 6 years. Just a vast empty exhaustion. When she finally emerged, her face was blotchy and swollen. Her makeup destroyed. She looked younger, somehow, more vulnerable. Like the girl I had fallen in love with before I realized she was in love with someone else's memory. I need to go to work tomorrow, she said, her voice robotic. I have a presentation, the Morrison account. I have been preparing for weeks. Allison, please do not. I cannot right now. I just cannot. She walked past me toward the bedroom and I let her go. What else was there to say? I had just detonated a bomb in the center of her carefully constructed reality and now we both had to live in the rubble. I slept in my study that night or did not sleep really. I sat in my leather chair, watching the sky lighten from black to navy to that particular shade of gray that comes right before dawn, thinking about choices and consequences and all the ways people hurt each other without meaning to. The next day crawled by with the speed of continents drifting. I went to my office, sat through meetings, reviewed contracts, did all the things that made me Jackson Hale, successful corporate attorney, pillar of the community. Nobody knew that my marriage had imploded the night before. Nobody saw the careful way I kept my face neutral. The way I gripped my pen just a little too tightly when someone mentioned their spouse. My secretary buzzed me at 3 o'clock in the afternoon. Mr. Hale, I have a call from Denver General Hospital. They say it is about your wife. The drive to the hospital was the longest 20 minutes of my life. Traffic crawled. Lights seemed timed specifically to make me wait. I kept picturing Allison in 1,000 different scenarios, each worse than the last. Had she done something stupid? Had she hurt herself? Was this my fault for ripping away her foundation so brutally? She was in a private room on the 4th floor, pale and small in the hospital bed, and 4 lines snaking into her arm. Her colleague Rachel was sitting beside her, looking uncomfortable and relieved to see me in equal measure. She passed out during the Morrison presentation, Rachel explained quietly. Just went down like someone cut her strings. Scared the hell out of everyone. The paramedics said it was probably stress and dehydration, maybe a panic attack. They want to keep her for observation. Thank you for staying with her. I managed to sound appropriately concerned. Appropriately grateful. I can take it from here. Rachel could not leave fast enough. When she was gone, I pulled a chair up to the bed, but I did not touch Allison. I sat 3 feet away, close enough to be present, far enough to maintain distance. She looked at me with eyes that held something I had never seen before. Not anger, not love, but a kind of terrified uncertainty. Like she had just realized she was standing on a frozen lake and could not remember which direction was safe. They want to keep me overnight, she said. For monitoring. I will handle everything. Work, the house, whatever needs doing. Jackson, not here. My voice was low, but firm. Not now. You need to rest. The doctor came in, a competent-looking woman in her 50s, who explained about blood pressure and stress responses and the importance of mental health. I nodded in all the right places, asked the appropriate questions, played the part of the concerned husband while feeling like an actor in a play I no longer understood. When we were alone again, the silence stretched between us like an ocean. Allison stared at the ceiling, tears leaking from the corners of her eyes to dampen the institutional pillow beneath her head. Everything I built my self-worth on was a lie, she whispered. Everything I thought I knew about myself, about what I wanted, who I was supposed to be, it was all based on being the girl that Aiden Brooks loved and lost, and he never loved me at all. No, I agreed quietly. He did not, and you knew. For 3 years, you knew and you let me keep believing. I gave my word to someone in pain. I would do it again. I leaned forward slightly, needing her to understand this one thing. But my silence was not permission for you to use him as a weapon against me. It was not a license to make me feel like second choice, like consolation prize, like the boring safe option you settled for. I may have kept his secret, but you kept your own. That you never actually chose me, Allison. You just chose to stop waiting for him. She turned her face away and I stood up. I am going home. Call me when they discharge you tomorrow and I will come get you. But when I do, we need to have a real conversation about what happens next. I walked out before she could respond, before the tears in her eyes could make me soften, before I could take back the line I had just drawn in the sand. The house felt different when I got back to it. Emptier somehow despite being filled with all our expensive things. All the markers of our supposed success. I poured myself another whiskey, stood at those massive windows looking down at Denver, and wondered when exactly I had become the kind of man who could drop a truth bomb on his wife and then walk away with his spine still straight. She came home the next afternoon in an Uber, pale and shaky, but walking under her own power. I was waiting in the living room, showered and dressed in casual clothes, a far cry from last night's business attire. She stopped in the doorway when she saw me, and I saw her gather herself, straighten her shoulders, lift her chin. Even in defeat, Allison Hale knew how to present herself. Sit down, I said. And this time it was gentler. We need to talk about what comes next. She perched on the edge of the couch like a bird, ready to take flight. Are you leaving me? I do not know yet. The honesty felt like pulling off a bandage. I know I should. I know that is what any self-respecting man would do after last night. But I also know that marriages are more complicated than single moments of cruelty, even public ones. I am so sorry. I held up a hand. Let me finish. I am going to lay out what I need, Allison. Not what I want, not what I hope for, but what I absolutely require if we are going to have any chance of surviving this. And you are going to listen, and then you are going to decide if you can actually do these things or if you just think you can because you are scared and ashamed right now. She nodded mute. First, therapy, intensive, long-term with someone who specializes in this kind of relationship trauma. Not coos counseling where we sit around and share our feelings. I mean, serious, deep work on why you spent 8 years holding me up against a fantasy and finding me lacking. Okay. Second, you need to talk to your family, your mother, your sister, whoever else feels entitled to make passive-aggressive comments about how I am not Aiden Brooks. You need to tell them the truth, all of it. And you need to make it clear that any future comparisons, any more questions about why I do not take you helicopter skiing or plan surprise weekends in Aspen will result in them no longer being welcome in our lives. She blanched at that, but nodded again. Third, absolute honesty about everything. Your feelings, your fears, your resentments. No more pretending things are fine while letting poison build up until it explodes at dinner parties. If you are unhappy, you say so. If you are scared, you say so. If you are thinking about him, about whether you made the wrong choice, you say so. I can do that. Can you though? I leaned forward, pinning her with my gaze. Because I am not interested in collecting promises you cannot keep. I am not interested in being your safety net while you figure out if you actually want to be married to me. I gave you 6 years of patience while you idealized a ghost. I gave you my word to a broken man in a Montana bar to protect your illusions. I gave you grace upon grace upon grace, Allison. But I will not give you permission to keep treating me like I am not enough. Her face crumpled. You are enough, Jackson. You are more than enough. You are the problem is you do not really believe that. You believe it right now in this moment because you are hurt and scared and facing the truth. But what happens in 6 months when this becomes just another story we survived? What happens when you start resenting me for being the one who shattered your comfortable fantasy? What happens when you look at me and remember that I am not the passionate adventure you thought you were supposed to have? She was crying again. Silent tears that carved tracks through her makeup. I do not know. I do not know anything anymore. Then figure it out. I stood up, suddenly exhausted beyond measure. You have my conditions. Meet them or do not. But do not string me along while you decide if I am worth the effort of change. I deserve better than that. Hell, even the version of you from 8 years ago deserved better than what I have settled for. I walked toward my study, that sanctuary I had claimed the night before. But her voice stopped me. Where does that leave us right now? Today I did not turn around. In limbo, I suppose. We live here. We go to work. We pretend for the outside world. But we are not really married anymore. Allison, we are two people sharing a very expensive piece of real estate while we figure out, if we remember, how to be partners instead of adversaries. The weeks that followed were excruciating. We moved through the house like ghosts, occupying the same space without really touching, speaking in polite sentences that said nothing. She started therapy. I could tell because she would come home with red eyes and a kind of exhausted vulnerability that made me want to comfort her and simultaneously keep my distance. She had the conversation with her family. I only knew because her mother called me at work one afternoon, her voice tight with suppressed emotion. Jackson. Allison told me what happened with Aiden. I had no idea. All these years I thought she trailed off the enormity of her misjudgment hanging in the air between us. I owe you an apology. Several apologies for every time I suggested you were not ambitious enough, not exciting enough, not like it is fine, Margaret. It is not fine. My daughter is lucky to have you and I failed to see that. We all did. The conversation ended awkwardly, but something shifted. Her sister sent flowers with a card that said simply, "Sorry I was such a bitch." It was not forgiveness. Not exactly, but it was acknowledgement. And sometimes that is all you can ask for. But Allison herself remained a mystery. She went to therapy. She stopped drinking wine at dinner. She never mentioned Aiden's name. But there was something missing in her eyes when she looked at me. Some spark that had been there even in our worst moments that now seemed extinguished. She looked at me with guilt, with remorse, with a kind of desperate hope that I would tell her everything was going to be okay. But I could not tell her that because I did not know if it was true. 3 months passed in this strange purgatory. I threw myself into work, took on new clients, stayed late at the office, not because I had to, but because going home felt like walking into a museum of our failed marriage. Everything was too careful, too polite, too aware of the explosives buried just beneath the surface. One Thursday night, I came home to find her in the kitchen cooking something that smelled like the castle she used to make when we first got married. She looked up when I entered and I saw the effort she was putting into recreating some version of the people we used to be. I thought we could have dinner together, she said, like we used to before everything got so complicated. I set down my briefcase, loosened my tie and walked to the wine fridge. Then I stopped remembering she had quit drinking and grabbed a beer instead. That smells good. We ate in near silence, punctuated by small observations about our days, about nothing that mattered. She had learned in therapy not to fill silence with nervous chatter. And I had learned that sometimes silence says more than words ever could. My therapist asked me today what I was most afraid of, Allison said suddenly, her fork pausing halfway to her mouth. Do you want to know what I said? If you want to tell me. I told her I was most afraid that you would never look at me the way you used to. With love instead of pity, with want instead of obligation. Her voice was steady, but her hands shook slightly, and she asked me why I thought I deserved that look back, what I had done to earn it. I sat down my beer, giving her my full attention. I did not have an answer, Jackson. I sat there in her office for what felt like forever and I could not think of a single thing I have done in the last 3 months except feel sorry for myself and wait for you to fix this. This is not something I can fix. Allison, I know that is what terrifies me. She pushed her plate away. Food barely touched. I have spent 3 months in therapy learning all these things about myself. About my fears of being ordinary. About using Aiden as a measuring stick for my worth. About all the ways I sabotaged our marriage because I could not stand the thought that I was just like everyone else. And you know what the hardest part is? What? Realizing that understanding why I did something does not undo the damage. Knowing I was insecure does not erase 6 years of making you feel insufficient. I can explain it now. Put words to the dysfunction. Trace it back to my childhood and my parents' rocky marriage and every other psychological crutch you could name. But none of that gives you back the love I took for granted. It was the most self-aware I had ever heard her be. And it broke something in my chest that I had been carefully keeping frozen. I do not want to feel sorry for you anymore, I said quietly. I do not want to be angry at you anymore either, but I do not know what to feel instead. Do you think you could ever forgive me? I think I already have in some ways, but forgiveness is not the same as forgetting, and it is not the same as trust. You hurt me, Allison, publicly, deliberately, using a weapon you knew would cut deepest. And even though I understand now that you are lashing out from your own pain, even though I can see you trying to change, I cannot unsee what I saw. I cannot unhear what you said. She nodded, tears streaming down her face, but she did not look away. Then what do we do? I do not know. I really do not know. The months continued to roll past, each one slightly different from the last, but following the same general pattern of polite coexistence punctuated by moments of raw honesty that left us both exhausted. Allison kept going to therapy. She stopped posting on social media. She started volunteering at a women's shelter downtown, working with abuse survivors, and came home with stories that made me see her in a new light. Empathetic, strong, present in ways she had not been before. But there was still that distance, still that careful way we moved around each other, afraid to breach the buffer zone we had established. We were roommates who used to be lovers, colleagues in the business of maintaining appearances. And more troubling than that, when she looked at me now, I saw fear in her eyes. Not love, not desire, not partnership, fear that I would leave, fear that she had finally destroyed the one good thing she had. She was not fighting for us. She was fighting against loss. There is a difference, and I felt it every single day. I came home one evening in late autumn to find her sitting on the floor of our bedroom, surrounded by photo albums and loose pictures spread out in a chaotic semicircle. She looked up when I entered and I saw her face was blotchy from crying. "I have been looking through these," she said, gesturing at the photos, "trying to remember when it started going wrong. When I stopped seeing you and started seeing through you to some imaginary alternative." I loosened my tie, sat down on the edge of the bed above her. "Did you figure it out?" "I think it was gradual, like carbon monoxide poisoning. Each little moment of comparison, each time I held you up against a memory and found you different instead of seeing that difference as good. It built up until it became the air I breathed, and I did not even notice I was suffocating both of us." She picked up a picture from our honeymoon, both of us laughing on a beach in B's, sun-drunk and stupid with new love. "I look so happy here." "We both do. What happened to these people? They grew up. They got busy. They stopped fighting for it. Did you stop fighting for it?" she asked, looking up at me. "Or did you just get tired of being the only one who was?" The question landed like a physical blow, because it was exactly right. "Both. Maybe. I do not blame you." She set the picture down carefully, precisely, as if it were something fragile that might shatter. "I have been thinking a lot about that night, the dinner party. Not just about what I said, but about why I said it. My therapist thinks I was testing you, sabotaging things because on some level, I felt like I did not deserve your patience. Like, if I could make you angry enough to leave, it would prove my worst fears about myself were true. That is an expensive way to prove a point." "It was a cruel way to prove a point," she corrected. "And it worked, did it not? You left. Maybe not physically. Maybe we still share this space. But you left me, Jackson. You took yourself away, and I cannot even blame you for it." I ran my hands through my hair, feeling every one of my 36 years. "What do you want me to say, Allison? That I still love you?" "I do, probably. Love does not just shut off like a faucet. But loving you and being able to trust you again, being able to fully give myself to this marriage, those are different things." "I know. Do you? Because from where I sit, you are doing all the right things. Therapy, volunteering, self-reflection. But you are doing them for the wrong reasons. You are doing them to get me back, to fix what you broke. You are doing them because you are afraid of being alone, of being the villain in this story. But I do not see you doing them because you actually want to be a different person." She opened her mouth to protest, then closed it again. The silence stretched. "You might be right," she finally said. "God, that is awful, but you might be right. How do I fix that? How do I change for the right reasons when the strongest motivation I have is not wanting to lose you?" I do not have that answer. Nobody does. Maybe that is the whole point. You have to find it yourself without me as the goal or the prize or the reason. You have to want to be better just because being bitter and comparative and stuck in the past was making you miserable, regardless of whether it was making me miserable too. She drew her knees up to her chest, wrapping her arms around them in a gesture that made her look impossibly young. "Do you think we have any chance? Be honest." I looked down at her, at the woman I had married with such hope, such certainty that we were building something permanent. I thought about the past 6 years of slow erosion, of death by 1,000 cuts from comparisons I was never meant to win. I thought about Aiden Brooks broken and crying in a Montana bar, about the secret I had carried for 3 years that had turned out to be the pin holding our whole marriage together. I thought about love and resentment and whether it was possible to have one without the other after everything we had been through. "Honestly," I said finally, "I do not know. I think we might have already broken too many things." She started to cry then, but not the dramatic sobbing from before. These were quiet tears, the kind that come from true grief rather than shock or shame. "When did you decide that?" "I have not decided anything yet. But I am being realistic, Allison. We have been in this holding pattern for months. You are changing or trying to, and I am watching you change. But I do not feel any different. I am still hurt. I am still wary. And I am still looking at you and seeing the moment you publicly humiliated me superimposed over every other moment we have ever shared. So, what do we do? Just keep existing like this until one of us has the courage to pull the trigger. Maybe I stood up needing distance, needing air. Or maybe we stop pretending this can be salvaged just because we have invested 8 years in it. Maybe we admit that some things break in ways that glue cannot fix. You are talking about divorce. It was not a question. I am talking about being honest about where we actually are instead of where we wish we were. I walked toward the door, then stopped. I need some time alone. I'm going to take a drive, clear my head. Do not wait up. Several more months crawled by in this painful limbo. Allison continued her therapy, continued volunteering, continued all the outward motions of change, but I watched her carefully, and what I saw broke my heart in a different way than her betrayal had. She was terrified. Every time I walked through the door, I saw relief flash across her face. Relief that I had come home at all. When I spoke to her, she analyzed every word for hidden meaning, for signs that I was about to leave. She moved through our home like someone walking on ice, testing each step before committing her weight. This was not love. This was fear masquerading as devotion. She was not choosing me each day. She was clinging to me to avoid the pain of loss. There is a difference, and that difference mattered more than anything else. I started noticing other things too. The way she would agree with everything I said, even when I could tell she had a different opinion. The way she had made herself smaller, quieter, less present. She was not becoming a better version of herself. She was erasing herself to become whatever she thought I wanted. One evening, I came home to find her cooking again. That same castle, and I felt something inside me finally snap. Not with anger, but with a terrible final clarity. Allison, we need to talk. She turned from the stove and I saw that familiar fear flash across her face. Is everything okay? No, I said quietly. No, it is not. She turned off the burner with shaking hands and sat down at the kitchen table. I sat across from her and for a long moment I just looked at her, really looked at her. You are not fighting for us, I said finally. You are fighting to not lose me. Do you understand the difference? I am trying to be better. You are trying to be whatever you think will make me stay. That is not the same thing as actually wanting to be here, wanting to be married to me, wanting this life we have together. I leaned back in my chair, suddenly exhausted. Every time I look at you, I see fear. Not love, not desire, not partnership. Fear. You look at me like I am a bomb that might explode at any moment because I am terrified of losing you. Exactly. That is exactly the problem. I ran my hands over my face. A marriage cannot survive on fear, Allison. It has to be built on something more than one person desperately clinging to the other to avoid being alone. You are not here because you want me. You are here because you are afraid of what it means if you do not have me. She was crying now, silent tears streaming down her face. That is not fair. I am doing everything you asked. Therapy, honesty, working on myself. You are doing those things to get me back, not because you actually want to be a different person. Not because you finally understand what was broken about the way you saw me, saw us, saw yourself. I stood up and something in my movement made her flinch. And I cannot keep living like this. I cannot keep being the thing you are afraid of losing rather than the person you actively choose. Jackson, please. I gave you 6 years of being second choice to a ghost. I gave you months of watching you do all the right things for all the wrong reasons. I cannot give you the rest of my life knowing that you are only here because you are too afraid to be anywhere else. What are you saying? I am saying that I deserve to be chosen. Not needed, not feared, not clung to out of desperation. Chosen actively, daily with joy rather than terror. And you cannot give me that, Allison. Maybe you never could. I walked toward our bedroom and I heard her follow me. Her footsteps quick and panicked. When I pulled out my suitcase and set it on the bed, she made a sound like something had broken inside her chest. What are you doing? Her voice was barely a whisper. What I should have done months ago. I opened my closet and started pulling out clothes, folding them with mechanical precision. I am leaving. Not for a hotel this time. For good. No, 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 Jackson, please. She grabbed my arm and I gently but firmly removed her hand. You promised. You said you would give me a chance. I gave you a chance, Allison. I gave you months of chances. But you have not been fighting for us. You have been fighting to keep me from walking away. And that is not the same thing. I continued packing, not looking at her because I knew if I saw her face, I might waver. And I could not afford to waver anymore. I am not leaving you because of Aiden. I am not leaving because of that joke at the dinner party or because you compared me to a fantasy or even because you humiliated me in front of colleagues. Then why? She was sobbing now. Full body sobs that shook her entire frame. I stopped packing and finally looked at her. Because in all these months, you have never once looked at me with anything except fear and guilt and desperation. You have never once made me feel like you actually want to be here with me building a life together. You only ever make me feel like I am the thing standing between you and your worst nightmare of being alone. That is not true. It is true. And somewhere deep down, you know it. I zipped up the suitcase and lifted it off the bed. I gave you a chance not to save our marriage, Allison. I gave you a chance to save yourself. to become someone who could be in a real partnership instead of clinging to shadows and fantasies. But you could not do it. You changed the surface things, stopped drinking, went to therapy, volunteered, said all the right words, but underneath you are still that scared 15-year-old girl who thinks being ordinary means being abandoned. Jackson, please, I can do better. I can change. You've been saying that for months and nothing has fundamentally changed. You still look at me with fear. You still measure yourself against some impossible standard. You still do not see me as who I actually am. You see me as the man you are afraid to disappoint. I walked toward the door and she moved to block my path. I love you, she said desperately. I love you, Jackson. Please do not do this. Do you? I asked quietly. Or do you love the idea of not failing at marriage? Do you love the security I represent? Do you love not having to face your mother and sister and admit that you destroyed something good? I watched her face as she tried to find an answer and could not. You do not love me, Allison. You might have once before. You spent 6 years comparing me to a ghost, but right now in this moment, you do not love me. You fear losing me, which is different. That is cruel. It is honest. I gently moved her aside and opened the bedroom door. And honestly, I am done. I am done being patient. I am done being understanding. I am done being the man you settle for while wishing you had something else. I am done being the safety net that keeps you from having to face who you really are. I walked through the living room, my footsteps echoing on the hardwood floors. She followed me, still crying, still begging, her words tumbling over each other in a desperate stream of promises and pleas. Jackson, please, I will do anything. Just tell me what you need. I will be better. I swear I will be better. I stopped at the front door and turned to face her one last time. What I need is for you to figure out who you are without me. What I need is for you to learn how to be happy with yourself before you try to be with someone else. What I need is for you to stop measuring your worth by whether or not you can keep a man from leaving you. I can do that. Not while I am here. I opened the door. Goodbye, Allison. Please, she whispered, her voice breaking. Please do not go. I cannot lose you. I cannot. You already lost me. You lost me the night you made that joke. Maybe you lost me years before that. In all those tiny moments when you chose to see what you did not have instead of what you did, I stepped through the doorway into the hall. I hope you find yourself someday. I hope you learn to be enough for yourself without needing someone else to prove your worth. But I cannot be here while you figure it out. I gave you all the chances I had to give and it was not enough. I am not enough and I am finally accepting that. That is not true. You are enough. You have always been enough. Then why did you spend 6 years making me feel like I was not? I asked and she had no answer. Take care of yourself, Allison. Really, take care of yourself. Not for me, not to win me back, but because you deserve to be happy. But you cannot be happy with me. And I cannot be happy with you. Not anymore. Not after everything. I turned and walked toward the elevator. Behind me, I heard her voice, raw and desperate. Jackson. Jackson, please. The elevator doors opened. I stepped inside and pressed the button for the lobby. The last thing I saw before the doors closed was Allison collapsed in the doorway of our apartment, her face buried in her hands, her whole body shaking with sobs. I rode down in silence, and when I reached the lobby, I walked out into the cold Denver night without looking back. 3 weeks later, my MIA lawyer called to tell me that Allison had agreed to all the terms of the divorce without contest. No fight, no negotiation, no last-minute attempts to save things. She signed everything he put in front of her and disappeared back into whatever life she was building without me. I should have felt relieved. I should have felt free. Instead, I just felt empty, like I had excavated something essential for my chest and left a hollow space where it used to be. Another month passed before I got the call from Margaret, Allison's mother. She is moving, Margaret said without preamble, to Portland. Some non-profit offered her a position running their legal advocacy program for domestic violence survivors. That is good, I said carefully. That is good for her. Is it? Margaret's voice was sharp. Is it good for her to be running away to another city? Another life? Because she cannot stand to be in Denver anymore? Because everywhere she goes reminds her of what she destroyed? Margaret, I am not calling to blame you, Jackson. You did what you had to do. You deserve to be happy, and my daughter could not give you that. A pause heavy with things unsaid. But I want you to know something. After you left, she did not fall apart the way I expected. She got up the next morning and went to therapy. She kept going to the shelter. She started this terrible, heartbreaking work of actually figuring out who she is when she is not defined by fear or comparison or desperately trying to keep someone from leaving. I am glad. Let me finish. Margaret's voice cracked slightly. She is doing the work now, the real work. Not to get you back. She knows that ship has sailed, but because she finally understood what you were trying to tell her, that she needed to save herself before she could be saved, that she needed to choose herself before anyone else could truly choose her. I closed my eyes, feeling something twist in my chest. It is too late. Margaret. I know. She knows, too. A long silence. I just thought you should know that you were right about all of it. She was not fighting for you. She was fighting against being alone. And now that she is alone, really alone, she is finally becoming the person she should have been all along. We said our goodbyes and I hung up the phone and sat in my new apartment, smaller, quieter, emptier than the penthouse, and wondered why doing the right thing felt so much like punishment. 2 months after that conversation, on a random Tuesday evening, I was at home when my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. I almost deleted it, but something made me open it instead. It was from Aiden Brooks. I heard about the divorce. I am sorry. I know that is meaningless coming from me, but I am sorry anyway. For what it is worth, I saw Allison a few weeks ago. Ran into her at a conference in Seattle. She is different, quieter, but more present, more real. She asked about you. Asked if I thought you were happy. I told her I hoped you were because you deserved it more than anyone I knew. She smiled. Not the bright fake smile she used to wear, but something sadder and more genuine. And said she hoped so too. Said you saved her by refusing to save her. That she finally understood what you were trying to teach her, but she figured it out too late. I thought you should know that whatever else happened, whatever pain there was, you taught her something important. You taught her that love is not the same as fear and that being chosen matters more than being needed. She gets it now. I just wish she had gotten it sooner. Take care of yourself, Hale. You're one of the good ones. I read the message 3 times, then set my phone down and walked to the window. My new apartment did not have the spectacular view that the penthouse did. From here, I could see a parking lot, a few trees, the ordinary sprawl of residential Denver stretching into the distance. It was not spectacular. It was not exceptional. It was just real. And somewhere in that thought, I felt the first faint stirring of something that might eventually become peace. I thought about Allison, about the girl I had married 8 years ago with such hope and such certainty. I thought about the woman she had become, scared, comparative, lost in a maze of her own insecurities. And I thought about the woman she might be becoming now in Portland, far away from me and from all the ghosts that had haunted our marriage. I hope she found herself. I hope she learned to be ordinary without feeling worthless, to be steady without feeling boring, to be enough without needing someone else to prove it. But I also knew with a clarity that felt both painful and liberating that it was not my job to be there while she figured it out. I had given her everything I had to give. My patience, my love, my forgiveness, my truth. And it had not been enough to save us because some things cannot be saved from the outside. They have to save themselves. I pulled out my phone and looked at Aiden's message one more time. Then I typed a response. Thank you for telling me. I hope she finds what she is looking for. And I hope she learns that the person she was looking for was herself all along. I hit send, then blocked the number. Not out of anger, but out of necessity. That chapter of my life was closed now, and I needed to let it stay closed if I was ever going to write a new one. Somewhere across town in an empty penthouse that used to be our home, Allison's phone sat on the coffee table, exactly where it had been for the past 3 weeks since she had finalized the Portland move. She had not checked it in days, too consumed with packing and planning and trying to breathe through the grief that threatened to swallow her whole. On the screen, a message notification blinked unread and waiting. It was from Aiden, sent weeks ago before he had reached out to Jackson. She had never opened it, could not bring herself to open it because she knew what it would say, and she was not ready to face the confirmation of what she already knew. But the message sat there anyway, patient and persistent. Take care of him if you can, Allison. He is the strongest and most decent man I have ever met. He gave me grace when I deserved condemnation, and he gave you years of patience you did not earn. If you lose him, you will regret it for the rest of your life. Not because he is perfect, but because he was real, and real is so much harder to find than exciting. I learned that too late. Do not make the same mistake. But she had made the same mistake. She had lost him, not to another woman or to circumstances or to the cruel randomness of life, but to her own inability to see what she had while she had it. The irony burned through her like acid. She had spent 6 years comparing Jackson to a fantasy, only to discover that the fantasy had never existed at all. She had thrown away substance for shadow, reality for illusion, and now she had neither. Allison sat on the floor of the empty penthouse, surrounded by boxes marked Portland, and finally allowed herself to feel the full weight of what she had destroyed. Not just a marriage, but a man who had loved her with the kind of steady, reliable devotion that she had mistaken for boring. A man who had protected her even when it cost him something. A man who had given her chance after chance to see him, really see him, and who had finally walked away when it became clear she never would. She pulled out her phone, looked at Aiden's old message for the first time, and felt something shatter inside her chest. He was right. Jackson was the strongest and most decent man she had ever met, and she had destroyed him slowly, death by 1,000 cuts, until there was nothing left but the ghost of what they could have been. She thought about calling him, texting him, showing up at his new apartment to beg for one more chance, but she stopped herself because she finally understood what he had been trying to tell her all along. He did not need her apologies. He did not need her promises of change. He did not need her at all. What he needed was someone who chose him every day, not out of fear, but out of genuine desire. Someone who saw him clearly and loved what she saw. Someone who did not need to lose him to understand his value. And she was not that person. Maybe she never had been. Maybe she could become that person someday in Portland after months or years of therapy and self-work and learning to be comfortable in her own skin. But by the time she got there, Jackson would be long gone, building a life with someone who appreciated him from the start. The thought should have devastated her, and it did in a way, but underneath the devastation was something else. A painful necessary acceptance that this was the consequence of her choices, that actions had prices, and she was paying hers now. She looked around the empty penthouse one last time at the space where they had built 8 years of a life together, and she let herself cry. Not the desperate, panicked tears of someone trying to change what had already happened, but the quiet, grieving tears of someone accepting that some things, once broken, stay broken forever. Tomorrow, she would get on a plane to Portland. She would start her new job, meet new people, build a new life. She would go to therapy, and do the hard work of becoming whole. She would learn to be enough for herself without needing a man to prove her value. But tonight, she would sit in the ruins of what she had destroyed and let herself feel every bit of the pain she had earned. Because Jackson was right about something else too. She could not move forward until she stopped running from the past. And the past was this: she had been given something rare and precious, and she had treated it like it was ordinary. She had been loved by a good man, and she had made him feel like he was not enough. She had been chosen, and she had spent 6 years wishing she had been chosen by someone else. Now she was unchosen, and she finally understood what she had lost. The city lights of Denver glittered through the penthouse windows, beautiful and indifferent. Somewhere out there, Jackson was building a life without her. Somewhere out there, he was learning to be happy again, to trust again, to love again. And she was here alone with her regrets and her lessons learned too late, finally becoming the person she should have been all along. But he would never know. And even if he did, it would not matter because some doors once closed stay closed forever. And the one between them had slammed shut the day he walked out with his suitcase and his dignity and his refusal to settle for anything less than what he deserved. She would spend the rest of her life knowing that she had held something precious and let it slip through her fingers, and that she realized with terrible clarity was exactly the punishment she had earned.